The new Netflix limited series Adolescence has come out, and I got a chance to binge it all this past weekend. The experience that I had with this show is one that I am never going to forget. It's a series that takes you on a harrowing journey through the complexities of growing up in a real world filled with social pressure, mental health struggles, but then most importantly, the more darker sides of the youth generation of today. In this video, we are going to dive deep into this show's very raw portrayal of those themes and explore how it sheds light on the often overlooked and troubling realities of what it means to be a kid in today's day and age with social media and where you get your influence from. Truly, this is one of the more depressing shows I've gotten the chance to see in a long time, and it has sat with me enough to the point where that is why I wanted to make this video here today. To everyone watching, what aspect of the show for you was the one that troubled you the most, and that will sit with you for a long time? Let me know in the comments as we run through this video. So what is Adolescence anyway? For those who are watching this video right now that haven't seen the show, it is a 4-part British limited series that dives into the life of a 13-year-old kid named Jamie Miller, who was arrested and accused for murder of one of his school classmates. The show follows the events that take place after that all happens through 4 episodes that explore 4 different instances of the process of what it would mean for a kid to be arrested and accused of such a crime. It is a show that is not based on a specific true story, but more so based on actual real-life events that have taken place specifically within the UK when it comes to violence of knife attacks as an example. That is the most non-spoiler way I could tell you what the show is about, and yet the only other thing I could tell someone who is watching this video that hasn't seen the show yet is that if you are a parent, I would highly suggest that you find the right time to watch something like this, because it will certainly hit those kinds of people the most. It is a show that shouldn't even really come off as being more essential to the UK part of the world, but at this point will now certainly be something to look at from all areas of the world in other different countries with vast and expansive online presences in the digital world of social media. The other thing that I would say is that if you are someone who is fascinated by filmmaking and how things are made, this show will also certainly appeal to you because it is one of the most impressively shot pieces of entertainment that I have ever seen. We'll talk more about that in a second, but that is the general gist for those who haven't seen the show yet, because I will be talking spoilers the rest of the video, so you have been warned. So as we come to find out through all 4 of the episodes, the kid that we follow, Jamie, did in fact kill the girl that was involved in the murder case that he was arrested for, and in each of the 4 episodes, they take you through the 4 separate stages of this specific criminal case. The first episode follows the immediate arrest and reveal at the end, showing us the audience that he did kill the girl on camera. Episode 2 follows the police investigation into the broader details that surrounded the murder. Episode 3 follows the psychological evaluation of Jamie as we see through the eyes of a psychologist how he acts with regards to why he committed the murder. And then Episode 4 deals with the trauma and fallout that the family of the kid experiences a full year after the arrest. Apart from Episode 1, the final 3 episodes are where the thematic elements come into play, which explore that sad and dark reality that I titled the video around. As I said already, the show is not particularly based on a real-life incident that happened, but it is inspired by real-life incidents of violence, particularly amongst young boys in the UK, aiming to provoke discussions around societal factors that contribute to such acts as that. The story serves as a way to tell a cautionary tale that, in a way, you could say is a lecture on how to urge parents and communities around schools in particular to be vigilant about the social media and internet influences that shape the younger generations of kids living today. That is where you get the more haunting and dark reality that the story set in motion for you once it is revealed to you that that is what the show is about in Episode 2. The very mention of who the main person the show centers the influence around is, I would say, what shocked me the most when it first gets revealed, because I wasn't expecting the name to be mentioned at all within this story. That person's name is Andrew Tate, and I can imagine that a good portion of people out there know who that is. Andrew Tate is a British-American former kickboxer and entrepreneur who has recently, in the last several years, created a social media personality around his more controversial views about how the world works with regards to what it means to be a man. His views have certainly caused and sparked a lot of widespread debates with people, looking at him as a very polarizing figure that they certainly would not agree with, but then you have the other side of people who would agree with him, which is what this show tackles, as those are the kind of people who look to him as a great influence with how they act in real life. Jamie in the show is a direct example of a kid who was influenced by him with regards to how he views women in particular, which the show explores in great detail. Tate is the very kind of influencer that can easily take advantage of a young kid's mind and make them think a certain way, even if, say, he has no direct correlation to how a kid might act based on those views. The show does not make any direct connection to the idea that Tate is responsible for what Jamie did to the girl he killed, but it is making a point that he absolutely influenced how the kid would think towards women in particular, as Tate is a figure that has not shied away with being very harsh and sometimes violent with his rhetoric of how he feels about women and how they should be treated. Charges, criminal accusations, and evidence that have come his way certainly signify that he is someone to take very seriously when it comes to that stuff. The shift in the influence of today's social media figures and influencers compared to those of 10 to 15 years ago has become a very multifaceted conversation to explore, especially with someone like me who lived in one of those eras of the digital social media generation we live in now. When I was in school as a kid, I was coming around into the first two generations of young kids who were influenced by the world of social media around the time between 2010 and up until around 2018 and 2020. I certainly did not have influencers and figures like Andrew Tate in my time who were very bad for the youth generations, and I had always grown up with people who are much better than that. The show makes light of that in the sense that it is the next two generations who are in schools nowadays that are getting it the worst when it comes to this idea of who you can be influenced by. I make it a point to be as honest as possible on this channel with making videos, and there is no truer of a statement from me than the way I have expressed my views on social media now. It has significantly gotten worse to the point where every day I do have the thought in mind to never use these platforms ever again. With the rise of influencers and grifter-type creators like Andrew Tate, who often promote such extreme, divisive, and harmful ideologies that include some of the worst aspects of what can make a human come off as the worst of the worst, we see that perpetuate negative stereotypes and unhealthy attitudes within the kids who are influenced by them. These influencers and content creators often push this stuff because they know that the platforms they speak about it on will benefit them and prioritize the kinds of things they say because it gets the most reaction, drama, and financial benefits to help them continue to say those things. It's gotten so bad to the point where, genuinely, I don't trust anything that most people say on these platforms anymore, especially something like Twitter, which has become a living, breathing pile of hot shit that may never recover again from where it used to be all those years ago. Adolescence as a show is not as much exploring the finer details of what I just outlined, but it is certainly making a case as to a specific example of where you could see a hypothetical real situation occur from someone like a kid who is influenced by the worst of the worst online to act a certain way that then makes them go into the worst kind of crime, which is murdering another human being. I do really appreciate that the filmmakers took this kind of stuff seriously, and you can clearly see it within the show that they are, because this is not something to shy away from, because it can happen to anyone, anywhere, and at any moment in time. In particular, I have to give massive credit where it is due to all the actors who expertly portrayed the fallout and effects of what came after episode 1. After what we see at the end of episode 1, that the truth is revealed to the father of Jamie that he did in fact murder the girl on camera, it all goes downhill from there in terms of the show making it so much more depressing. The immediate reaction is something that would definitely sit with you, but it's only the influence of the after effects that make it so much more heartbreaking for you as a viewer to watch. The father of Jamie, Eddie Miller, played by Stephen Graham, is one of the best performances I have seen in television in a long time. Not only was he a part of the creation of this show, but he amplifies every single human emotion that a person could possibly experience around this particular story. The moment that made me shed the tear was the final few minutes of the finale, where after he learns that his son is going to change his plea and plead guilty to the charges, you can see him go through every single possible emotion that a parent would never want to experience in their life. He lets it all out, and at the very end, when he takes the teddy bear toy and tucks it in the bed, I couldn't help myself in that moment because it was right then and there that the character of Eddie knew that he would never be able to do that again to his actual kid. His son would potentially spend a majority of the rest of his life, if not all of his life, in prison because of what he did, because of the influence of the online world that made him think a certain way to then go and commit such a terrible act. I also don't want to shy away from showing love to the actors who play the mother and sister, Manda and Lisa Miller. All three as a collective family in episode 4 were really good together, and how they portrayed the effects of being a part of a family of a kid who was involved in a murderous act, and there is nothing I can appreciate more about the show than the dialogue and the execution of it from the actors. Every single word feels like you are watching real-life people talk to each other instead of watching actors portray characters. I also want to show appreciation to Ashley Walters and Faye Marseille of Andor fame, which is the show that I know her from the most, as they play the police detectives involved in the case. Ashley Walters as Luke Bascom gets the most, considering he is the one who actually has a kid, and at the end of episode 2, you see how much more he is appreciative of the fact that he does have a good kid, and decides to take him out for food after solving one of the other mysteries behind the case with regards to who was involved in helping Jamie. Probably the most underrated performance was Aaron Doherty as Jamie's psychologist. That episode was an acting masterclass from the kid, but also a good performance from Aaron, who portrays someone that has to stand fast in the presence of this kid who is acting in ways that you would never want to see a kid act out. You see at the end of that episode that she just experienced something that will pain her emotionally, and in a way she maybe regrets having experienced it in the first place because it was just that bad. You see just how troubled this kid actually is as that episode explores some of the other finer details behind how he truly feels about certain things because of the influence that he had from social media and influencers like Andrew Tate. At the same time, I also appreciate that the show doesn't shy away from the fact that parental influence also played a part in how he acted. Eddie as Jamie's father has an aggressive side to him in the sense that he's not physically violent, but he is certainly someone who won't shy away from getting mad and aggressive in his more verbal tone if he was compelled to act that way. Eddie mentions as much that he got that from his father and that he never wanted to relive that within his own kids when influencing them as a parent. It is these kinds of themes that I think the show does so well in exploring that you might not get in other projects that, say, might rush through in exploring them and not focus on as much of the characters who are the driving force here. I have read online that some people are a little annoyed that we didn't actually get to see much more of the process behind what it actually is like to go through the steps of this particular kind of criminal case, and to a degree, I can understand what those people are saying, but at the same time, you also can't stray away from the idea that maybe it wasn't the filmmaker's intention to show everything. The filmmakers probably didn't want to do another episode showing the criminal case and the trial because the evidence was conclusive enough that he committed the murder, and so there would be no court trial for it to even happen. I think having 4 episodes explore these points in time and specific characters was just enough, and I think you as a filmmaker would be putting yourself at risk if you try to do a little bit too much than what you were asked of. I guess in a way, I'm kind of glad that there wasn't a separate episode that went more into, say, following characters who did a deep dive into all the other influences and celebrities that might influence these kids. I think just by mentioning one particular person with Andrew Tate, you did enough to give people an idea as to what it is that you're trying to say with your overall message and commentary. And I have to say, from a filmmaking perspective, this show is one of the most impressive things I think I've ever seen. Since the world of cinematic pictures could move and audio would become a thing that you could hear through the big screens of watching these films and television shows, never have I ever seen a more impressive filmmaking feat when it comes to camera work especially. If you go online and look up a bunch of the behind the scenes that thankfully Netflix has released several days after the show premiered, you can see that a lot of effort and time went into creating these 1 hour long seamless episodes. Shooting an entire almost 1 hour long episode without cutting is so impressive that other movies have tried to do similar things, but have hid away the cuts to make it seem like they were all what we like to call oneers. A oneer is a stitched together sequence of events that show what a scene could look like if it was all filmed without cutting away. As a recent example, the film 1917 does something very similar throughout the whole runtime to elicit the idea that it was all done in one take. Adolescence takes all of that and throws it out the window and actually goes and shoots it all within one cut with some very innovative filmmaking techniques, particularly with the usage of drone technology to help film certain sequences. The drone scene in episode 2 is what a lot of people will talk about, as that is really, really impressive stuff that comes from the original thinking to help tell a story. I'm sure that some people will say that this whole thing will come off as a gimmick, but in my opinion, I really don't know if there was any other more effective way that you could tell this story. It's the filmmakers trying something original, but also taking a risk that could easily have not translated well, but in my opinion, I think it did. My hat goes off to everyone who worked on the show, and Stephen Graham as well, who was involved in the creation of it. He has said in interviews that this particular stuff happening in real life right now is something that he really wanted to explore, rather than to just make a generic story of it all around a broader narrative. Taking one hypothetical situation of what could happen to a single kid was just enough, and I think that he knew deep down that that was the best way to go about this. I think it is really effective how they went about doing it in order to tell such a bleak and depressing story that depicts the sad and dark reality of where we are seeing certain people go nowadays, but potentially where we could also see them go in the future. And I think more than anything, people need to see this because it will allow them to learn more about what we could potentially prevent anything like what the kid Jamie goes through in committing the violent act that he did. And there you have it. That is my commentary and analysis of the new Netflix limited series Adolescence. From the outside looking in, I really hope people watch this show because I am very worried about the young generations of today and where the future will take them. So what do you all think of the show for those who have watched it, and along with my video's commentary? Leave your comments down below and let's have a nice and respectful conversation about it. I can't ask enough that you be respectful, as I do read all my comments to the best of my ability. Thank you all for stopping by my channel. If you want to see more moving forward from me with regards to film and television and you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe if you are new here and turn on that notification bell. I'm trying to build a community on here and your support would be appreciated. That's a wrap, folks. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day, and I will see you all soon for the next video.